Lee Kuan Yew once warned that great powers rarely collapse from a single defeat. They collapse when they miscalculate the balance between ambition and capacity. And now, decades after his most famous geopolitical predictions, his strategic framework is being rediscovered as the United States Navy faces pressures unlike anything seen since the height of the Cold War. What he revealed was not about ships. It was not about missiles. It was not about aircraft carriers. It was about mathematics. Power, he believed, is a calculation. And when the numbers stop adding up, empires begin to strain. Today, the US Navy is being pushed to the limit, not because it lacks strength, but because it is being asked to do too much in too many places at the same time. Think about what that means. For the first time in modern history, the United States must simultaneously deter a rising China in the Pacific, contain Russia in Europe, manage instability in the Middle East, secure shipping lanes in the Red Sea, and maintain forward presence in the Arctic. Each theater demands ships. Each crisis demands readiness. Each signal of weakness invites testing. And there are only so many holes in the water. Lee Kuan Yew understood something most leaders did not. Geography never changes, but power balances do. When he analyzed America's future decades ago, he did not question whether it would remain powerful. He questioned whether it could remain everywhere. That distinction matters now more than ever. The US Navy is designed around carrier strike groups, the floating air bases that project American power across oceans. These formations are not merely military assets. They are political instruments. When a carrier arrives offshore, it signals resolve. When it leaves, it signals reprioritization. But today, those carriers are rotating at a pace that stretches maintenance schedules and crew endurance. In the Western Pacific, naval forces conduct freedom of navigation operations in contested waters. In the South China Sea, maritime disputes have turned into strategic flashpoints. Submarines patrol silent corridors beneath increasingly crowded seas. Destroyers escort allies. Amphibious groups rehearse contingencies that policymakers hope will never be needed. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, missile threats from non-state actors and regional powers demand constant air defense readiness. In Europe, naval assets reinforce NATO commitments as tensions remain elevated. In the Red Sea, commercial shipping has faced attacks that require sustained naval escorts. Each mission is justified. Each deployment is strategic, but the sum of them is exhausting. Lee Kuan Yew once described global power as a chessboard where every move affects three others. The United States, he warned, must avoid overextending itself by reacting to every provocation. Strategic patience, he argued, was as important as military strength. Yet the Navy today operates in an environment where patience is increasingly rare. Political cycles are short, crises erupt instantly through social media, allies demand reassurance, adversaries test boundaries, and ships cannot be everywhere at once. Consider the arithmetic of naval readiness. A single aircraft carrier requires months of maintenance after deployment, crews rotate, aircraft require servicing, supply chains must replenish precision munitions and spare parts. When deployments extend unexpectedly, maintenance windows shrink. Over time, that creates compounding strain. Lee's core insight was this: great powers must align commitments with capabilities. If commitments expand faster than capacity, friction emerges, not immediately, but gradually. Today's Navy faces exactly that equation. Shipbuilding timelines stretch across years. Modern destroyers and submarines are technologically advanced, but expensive. Industrial capacity has limits. Meanwhile, adversaries invest heavily in anti-access and area denial systems, missiles designed specifically to target large surface vessels. The cost curve is shifting. A single advanced missile can threaten a multi-billion-dollar platform. Defensive systems are improving, but so are offensive capabilities. Lee Kuan Yew foresaw this dynamic when he studied the Pacific balance. He predicted that China would not attempt to mirror American power ship for ship. Instead, it would seek asymmetric leverage, tools that complicate American intervention without matching it globally. That prediction now frames the Navy's dilemma. To deter conflict, the Navy must show presence. To survive in contested zones, it must disperse. To protect assets, it must invest in defense. To modernize, it must allocate resources. Each choice affects the others. And as deployments expand, so does fatigue. Personnel retention becomes harder during prolonged high-tempo operations. Sailors spend extended months at sea. Families bear the strain. Recruitment faces demographic challenges. Training cycles compress to meet operational demand. The public rarely sees this dimension. But Lee understood that morale is a strategic variable. He often emphasized that institutions, not just hardware, determine resilience. A Navy's strength lies as much in its people as in its fleet. The United States still commands unmatched maritime experience, but sustaining that advantage requires balance. Now add another layer. Global trade remains heavily maritime. Critical supply chains move through choke points, the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, the Bab el-Mandeb. Disruptions in any of these areas ripple across energy markets and manufacturing networks. When tensions rise, insurance premiums spike, shipping reroutes, energy prices fluctuate, naval presence stabilizes these flows. But stabilizing them demands constant vigilance. Kuan once remarked that America's greatest advantage was its alliances. Unlike rising powers, it did not stand alone. Yet alliances also create obligations. When partners feel threatened, they expect reassurance. That reassurance often comes in the form of ships. The Indo-Pacific strategy, for example, requires rotational deployments across multiple partner nations. Exercises demonstrate interoperability. Forward-basing agreements expand logistical reach. Each initiative strengthens deterrence. Each also consumes bandwidth. The Navy's force structure was built for a different era, post-Cold War assumptions of uncontested access and shorter regional conflicts. Today's environment is multipolar and simultaneous. The Navy must deter two near-peer competitors across vast oceans while responding to regional crises. That is a historically unprecedented demand. Lee's warning echoes, ambition must match capacity. But is the United States adjusting capacity fast enough? Shipyards are expanding, but construction delays persist. Advanced submarines require complex supply chains. Emerging technologies, unmanned vessels, artificial intelligence, distributed maritime operations promise efficiency, but require integration and testing. Transformation takes time. Meanwhile, operational tempo does not slow. This is where Lee's realism becomes strikingly relevant. He argued that America must prioritize. It cannot treat every regional instability as equally vital. Strategic clarity reduces unnecessary commitments, yet political dynamics often reward visible action over restraint. When a crisis emerges, deploying naval assets signals leadership. It reassures markets and allies. But repeated deployments accumulate strain. There is also the technological dimension. Precision-guided munitions, hypersonic missiles, and advanced surveillance systems have altered maritime warfare. The open ocean is no longer opaque. Satellites track movements. Drones extend reconnaissance. Operating dark is increasingly difficult. That means survivability requires new doctrines, distributed lethality, smaller formations, networked systems. The traditional carrier-centered model evolves under pressure. Lee anticipated such shifts. He believed technological revolutions compress strategic timelines. When detection and strike capabilities improve, decision windows shrink. This compresses crisis management. The Navy must prepare not only for sustained presence, but for rapid escalation. Add fiscal realities. Defense budgets face domestic constraints. Infrastructure needs, healthcare costs, debt servicing, all compete for funding. Expanding the fleet significantly requires long-term bipartisan commitment. Yet procurement cycles outlast political cycles. Lee Kuan Yew often emphasized long-term planning. He admired systems that looked decades ahead. Naval strategy, by necessity, demands that horizon. Ships commissioned today will serve for 40 years. The question becomes, what kind of world will they sail in? If commitments remain global and simultaneous, fleet size and resilience must reflect that. If strategy narrows to prioritize specific theaters, resources can concentrate. But ambiguity increases pressure. Consider the Red Sea operations protecting commercial shipping. These missions are essential for economic stability, but they tie down high-value assets that might otherwise rotate for maintenance or train for high-end conflict. The Navy becomes both guardian of global trade and deterrent against peer competition. That dual role stretches doctrine and endurance. Lee Kuan Yew would likely frame this as strategic overload risk, not immediate collapse, but cumulative wear. Great powers, he believed, rarely recognize overstretch until it manifests in readiness gaps. Yet there is another side to this equation. The very fact that the U.S. Navy is in demand everywhere underscores its enduring centrality. No other maritime force can replicate its global reach. No alliance network rivals its logistical integration. Being pushed to the limit is partly a testament to its necessity. Adversaries calculate based on its presence. Allies anchor their security planning around it. Lee admired this networked power, but he also warned that rising powers test margins carefully. They probe response thresholds. They exploit distractions. If naval assets are spread thin, response time increases. That is why strategic prioritization matters. Now think about the Pacific theater. The distances are enormous. Sustaining operations requires refueling nodes, maintenance hubs, secure communications. Anti-ship missile ranges extend hundreds or thousands of kilometers. Operating within contested envelopes demands layered defense. Carrier strike groups remain formidable, but they are not invulnerable. The Navy invests in integrated air and missile defense, in electronic warfare, in cyber resilience. All of it consumes resources. Kuan once predicted that the Pacific would become the central arena of global competition. He believed America would remain present, but only if it recognized the scale of the challenge early. That recognition appears to be underway, but recognition must translate into sustainable structure. Personnel numbers, fleet composition, industrial base resilience. These determine endurance. The U.S. Navy's current strain reflects not weakness, but intensity of mission. Still, intensity without recalibration risks burnout. Lee's most overlooked insight was that restraint can be a strategic asset. Choosing where not to engage preserves strength for decisive theaters. Today, policymakers face that calculus daily. Should naval assets remain indefinitely in secondary conflicts? Should allies assume greater burden sharing? Should unmanned systems offset manpower demands? Each decision shapes long-term sustainability. The world sees carrier deployments as symbols of imminent action, but the deeper story is logistical endurance. How long can high-tempo operations persist before maintenance backlogs expand, before ship availability drops, before recruitment pipelines tighten further? These are not dramatic questions. They are structural ones. And Lee Kuan Yew specialized in structural thinking. He believed geography and demography constrain ambition. For the United States Navy, shipyard capacity and personnel pipelines are the modern equivalents. Industrial mobilization cannot be improvised overnight, yet the Navy is adapting. Unmanned surface vessels are being tested. Submarine production accelerates where possible. Partnerships with allies expand interoperability. Maintenance reforms aim to reduce downtime. These steps signal recognition of the strain, but transformation takes sustained focus. Lee would likely argue that clarity of grand strategy must guide fleet design. If the primary challenge is peer competition in the Pacific, resources should reflect that. Peripheral engagements should align with alliance frameworks to distribute load. The risk lies in trying to dominate everywhere equally. History shows that naval supremacy requires concentration of force. At the same time, globalized economics blurs regional boundaries. Instability in one choke point reverberates globally. Thus, the Navy's dilemma, concentrate or distribute. This tension defines current operations, and while headlines focus on individual deployments, the deeper narrative is systemic. Lee Kuan Yew's revelation was not a secret document. It was a worldview. Power must be sustainable to remain credible. The U.S. Navy remains unmatched in tonnage, experience, and alliance reach, but its missions are expanding faster than its fleet. That is the pressure point. If adjustments occur through increased shipbuilding, technological innovation, burden sharing, and strategic prioritization, the strain becomes manageable. If commitments continue expanding without structural growth, the margin narrows. The next decade will determine which path unfolds. For now, the Navy sails at high tempo across multiple oceans. Carrier groups rotate rapidly. Submarines patrol quietly. Destroyers escort commercial vessels. Amphibious ships train with partners. Each movement signals presence. Each also signals workload. Lee Kuan Yew believed America would remain a Pacific power because it had no choice. Its interests, alliances, and economic networks required it. But he also believed endurance required discipline. The United States Navy is being pushed to the limit, not because it is failing, but because it is central to global stability in a fragmented era. The question is not whether it can respond today. It can. The question is whether its structure, funding, and strategic clarity will allow it to sustain this tempo for decades. That is the true test, and that is what Lee Kuan Yew revealed long ago. Great powers must choose carefully where to exert force or risk exhausting the very instruments that secure their influence. The oceans remain vast. The commitments remain many. The fleet remains powerful. But power, as Lee taught, is ultimately about balance. And balance is now the Navy's most critical mission.